By the 1950s, Dubai was a settlement on the verge of disappearing. The global pearl trade, which had sustained the local economy for generations, had collapsed under the pressure of the Great Depression and the rise of Japanese cultured pearls. The geography of the city was working against its recovery. Dubai Creek, the only natural harbor for merchant ships, was rapidly shallowing. Massive sandbanks were choking the passage, leaving the water too shallow for the heavy trading vessels the city desperately needed. British advisors and regional skeptics viewed the situation as terminal. They argued that the silting of the creek was a permanent natural decline, signaling an unavoidable end to Dubai's relevance as a port. Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum rejected this assessment. He viewed the silting not as a natural disaster, but as a technical engineering problem that could be solved through massive, calculated intervention. Survival required a total shift in strategy. Instead of hoping for a favorable natural harbor, the city would have to actively manipulate its environment to force trade back into its waters. To fund the dredging, Sheikh Rashid secured a £400,000 loan from the ruler of Kuwait. It was a massive financial gamble, backed by a belief that the city's customs revenues would eventually grow large enough to pay it back. In the year 1959, the dredging work finally began. Industrial dredgers arrived to begin the violent process of churning through the silt and sand, carving a deep 4,000-foot-long channel through the creek bed. The project was also a feat of urban planning. The sand and mud pulled from the bottom of the creek were repurposed as landfill, creating new, stable ground along the waterfront for future offices and warehouses. Within a few years, the results were clear. The deepened channel allowed heavier coastal steamers to enter the creek, instantly increasing the volume of goods flowing through the city. This project established a new economic thesis for Dubai. The city could manufacture its own growth by building the infrastructure for trade before the trade even arrived. By the 1960s, the creek was already reaching its limit. The volume of ships was so high that vessels were waiting for weeks offshore, creating a new bottleneck that threatened to stall the city's momentum. Sheikh Rashid responded by looking past the creek entirely. In 1972, he inaugurated Port Rashid, a dedicated deep-water harbor built to handle a much larger class of international cargo ship. He followed this with the construction of Jebel Ali Port, the largest artificial harbor in the world. It was an aggressive bet on the future of global container shipping, designed to handle a volume of trade that didn't yet exist. However, maritime trade was only one part of the equation. To truly connect with global markets, the city needed a way to move people and high-value goods at much higher speeds. Despite its isolated location, the city invested in Dubai International Airport. Adopting an open skies policy, the government turned a modest terminal in the desert into a vital node connecting Europe, Asia, and Africa. By systematically identifying and destroying these physical limits, Dubai moved from being a regional stopover to a central component of the global supply chain. But physical infrastructure is only effective if the business environment is equally frictionless. International capital avoids ports and runways if they are choked by heavy taxes and bureaucracy. To solve this, the government created the Jebel Ali Free Zone, or JAFZA. It offered foreign companies zero corporate tax and 100% ownership, removing the traditional legal barriers to international investment. This administrative speed was rooted in the culture of the Majlis. In these daily councils, any merchant could speak directly to the sheikh to have a problem resolved. This tradition of direct, face-to-face governance allowed the city to bypass the layers of red tape that slowed trade in neighboring countries. When oil was finally discovered in 1966, the reserves were found to be modest. Compared to neighbors like Abu Dhabi, Dubai's hydrocarbon wealth was finite and relatively small. Sheikh Rashid chose to treat this oil revenue strictly as startup capital. Instead of using it to fund a welfare state, every dollar was reinvested into the permanent trade and logistics systems that would outlast the oil. Dubai's rise was powered by this union of logistical speed and regulatory openness, which transformed a modest resource base into a world-class trading hub. Non-oil sectors like logistics and finance expanded so successfully that hydrocarbon revenue accounts for less than 10% of GDP. The machine is sustaining itself. A compounding cycle of growth, where global firms and ports attract more talent and capital every year. The 38-story Dubai World Trade Center was a physical signal of this ambition. Built when the city was still relatively small, it stood as a tall, lonely proof of the belief that if the capacity is built, the market will eventually fill it. Sheikh Rashid's legacy is defined by this willingness to engineer the future before it is strictly necessary. He understood that a city must stay ahead of its own bottlenecks to remain relevant. The city's evolution proves that a community's fate is not limited by its physical inheritance. By systematically rebuilding its own environment, a small settlement can turn a geographical dead end into a global center of power.